Hi, how are you? My name is Helena Mulkerns, and I'd like to say hello to everybody at the Skibbereen Speakeasy. Thanks to Paul Kestel for asking me to read a story. I'm delighted to be able to do that, and I hope everybody is keeping safe and having fun at home during the lockdown. This is a piece which appeared actually in an anthology called A Reading the Future, edited by Alan Hayes, came out a couple of years ago, and it's called You Think You're Smart. They were always fighting, but the row that did it this time was when the news came in on the radio that a girl called Tess Lavin down the country had had a baby in a grotto and died. And the baby died too. She was 14, younger than Ria even. Nobody knew she was pregnant until they found her there in the morning, right under the statue of the Virgin Mary. The row was at the tea table, the worst one in a long while. Dad started ranting on that it was a disgrace. Usually Mammy shut up and said nothing, not to give him an excuse but she seemed upset about this girl. Little slut, Dad said. Deserves what she got. Young ones these days, do they not listen to the nuns anymore? Tiernan, the child died screaming in a field in the middle of the night, in a field with no one to help her. She was afraid to go to the nuns. Well, if either of these two came home in that state, they'd want to be afraid as well. You'd have them die screaming in a field, is it? Look, Dad said, don't get me started. But of course he did get started. Slow at first, building up to scary. Ria was afraid that he was going to have a go at Mammy again, except that he hadn't been across the way yet. Instead, he smashed his steak knife down into his plate so hard that it split right in two, and the blood from the meat went running across the white formica table like a warning. Mammy screamed, Jesus! And Fiacre and Tom started to giggle, so Susan dragged them away upstairs. And this was Ria's cue to go out into the front room to watch telly. Susan always took the twins up to the back bedroom and read them stories, as if they wouldn't still hear the roaring going on down in the kitchen. And if Susan was the little Mammy, then Ria stayed downstairs to make sure he didn't damage the real one. She used to think she would just kill him one day, but he was so much bigger than her, and she was afraid that if she tried and didn't manage it, that he'd turn around and just kill her instead, or put Mommy in the hospital again. Once she went into a pharmacy in the city centre and asked them what was the fastest way to kill rats. Would it be arsenic maybe? But all the old dear had was this stuff that came with big signs you were supposed to put up around your garden saying poison. Feck all good that'd do. Eventually, she worked out that threatening him with the guards was fairly effective. Except when he had drink on him. Then his ire turned towards her. Little bitch, you think you're smart. After Dad had stormed off to the pub, Ria found herself helping Mammy pack the big battered suitcase that went once a year to Benidorm. They were all off to Nana's again, for Jesus' sake. I didn't marry him, Maria. I married a different man. Yeah, Ria mumbled. She didn't know what to say. Susan was the one who could always talk to Mammy, not her. Ria was barely listening anyway. She was thinking it was time, maybe, to act on her plan. Not maybe, definitely. It was what she'd wanted to do for years, but so far, she'd never had the chance. When the taxi arrived, there was another scene. Ria refused to leave. Somebody has to stay and take care of Dad. Mammy exploded. You ungrateful little cow, she shrieked. After all the times I stood up for you. Well, you can stay here and do what you bloody want. On your own head, be it. The twins started to cry, and Susan looked at her as if she'd lost it. But Ria just stood in the porch, feeling like shite. After she closed the door, she ran up to her room. The evening sailing was at 8:45. She packed her rucksack, took her money out of the tea caddy under her bed and put on some makeup, stomach churning like a spin dryer. It hardly seemed like an hour and a half since the 6 o'clock news. She sat in her bed for a minute to catch her breath. After 2 years of scheming, of saving up and working at the shop, this was it. Time to go. She had followed the packing list she kept folded up in the tea caddy, even remembering to put in her inhaler and her Purple Rain cassette. As an afterthought, she took Fiacre's stickman drawing of Charlie Haughey down off the wall near her bed and stuffed it in the bag as well. There was a crash downstairs then as Dad came in the front door and it slammed back against the hall table. Ria jumped, grabbed her bag and waited until she heard him stagger upstairs into the loo. Jesus, the actual sound of him back in the house drunk made her stomach heave. She slung the rucksack onto her back, took her bag, glanced around the room and went down the stairs as quietly as she could. Outside, she hurried down to the main road, running the last 20 yards as she spotted number 8 in the distance. She had her student card, that would do as ID. One change at Holyhead, train to Euston Station by morning. As she held her hand out for the bus, she started laughing. She was actually doing this. She was going to London. On the boat, there was a telly in the bar, and the news was going on about that girl in the grotto. Poor Tess Lavin, who'd been afraid of the nuns. She'd probably been afraid of her dad too, God love her. The volume was up really high, and the entire bar watched as a priest and a social worker were interviewed about the scandal. The Archbishop would make no comment, but there were some choice opinions from the politicians, the one Mammy called pigs in suits. "Them bastards," said a woman beside her. "What would they know?" Then a severe-looking woman with short hair was on the screen talking to a reporter. "She's a tragic symbol of the oppression of women in this country, all the more tragic because of her absolute innocence." Ria wondered if Mammy and Susan were watching this in Nana's. "Who's that bitch?" barked one of the men sitting at the bar. "She's the one started up a halfway house for battered wives," said the barman. "Jesus," snorted the drinker. "She was my wife, I'd batter her." Laughter echoed down the pints. A lump rose in Ria's throat. She took a drink of her harp to get rid of it. What did she care? She was leaving. She took a cigarette out of the packet on the table in front of her, trying to look the 18 that she'd have to be by the time she got to London. It wasn't that hard. Thank you. So, have a nice evening at Speakeasy or in your home or wherever you are, and look forward to seeing you again in real time. Thank you.